Today's topic is about the challenges that COVID has posed to us, the visually impaired people, and the opportunities that we see in COVID, and the opportunities that from COVID that would help us as we move forward. I think it has influenced our lives, and we would be kind of discussing in a conversation about what might be some of the challenges we faced, and what are the challenges, what are the opportunities we have seen, and going forward, what are the opportunities that would take our lives forward. This discussion, India has 5.4 million visually blind and visually impaired people according to the census of India, but ये 5.4 मिलियन लोग हैं जो दृष्टिबाधित हैं। जाहिर है कि जो हम आज बात करेंगे पूरे 5.4 मिलियन लोगों के लिए तुरंत लागू नहीं होगा, क्योंकि कई लोग ऐसे हैं जिनको टेक्नोलॉजी का एक्सेस नहीं है, कई लोग ऐसे भी हैं जो स्कूल नहीं गए हैं, जिनको डेवलपमेंट, जो सरकार और एनजीओज का जो डेवलपमेंट प्रोग्राम वहां तक पहुंचा नहीं है, तो उनके लिए जाहिर है कि आज इस जो हम चर्चा करेंगे उनके लिए लागू नहीं है। बट इस सेशन में जो आए हैं, मेरे ख्याल से हम सब के लिए ये लागू होगा। इट विल बी यूजफुल एंड इट विल बी relevant to all of us, and this will also be relevant to all the people who have been to school, who have been to college, who have aspirations in life. I think this discussion will be very, very useful. So welcome, Subbu, to this session. And in your mind, what have been some of the challenges that this COVID has posed to us as a visually impaired community?
If you take the challenges, number one is, the irony of not touching. Because the irony of not touching, or if you want to put it the other way, the irony of social distancing. Because I think visually impaired community is in a very unique position, because we thrive on touch. We thrive on touch. Even the fact that we read braille is something which is based on the touch sensation. But imagine, we are going to places where people would not either like to touch you.
Yeah,
People will.
We are a very tactile community,
Exactly.
right? हम लोग छूते हैं. We have every second occasion we tend to touch. We need to touch. Yeah.
And we can't
That's
touch
right.
with the gloves on.
Point. Yeah,
We can't touch with the gloves on. Now what's happening is that there is a layer of protective gears that's coming in between us, our open fingers, and the objects that we would like to touch. Number one. Number two is there's this apprehension. See, I was in the hospital for a week. And even before that, the first time I noticed that people stepped back when they looked at us. I wouldn't say that it's especially it's a specific to people with disability or people with the vision impairment, but people who usually come forward to help us were stepping back. It's a psychological thing. I wouldn't say that this is basically something that they kind of plan. It's a very subconscious reaction. This is what COVID has done to us. If there's something that can crystallize our visually challenged experience of COVID, it is this fact that for the first time we are witnessing able-bodied people around us stepping back instead of stepping forward to help us.
You were in hospital because you had COVID, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. That again broke a lot of assumptions that we have about ourselves. See, I was at home for effectively 200 days without stepping out at all. I didn't see even the sunlight. It was like I dare say it was like Robin Island, but of course I wasn't in solitary confinement. I was with people over here. Even an apter analogy would be the Big Boss house. Instead of 100 days, it's 200 days here. So I thought I was
In the
safe.
normal course of things, Subbu,
Yeah.
no, right?
Yeah, yeah. You
Can
said
you
you
hear
said
me?
something. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. In the normal course of things, you see the sunlight in light of wind.
Yes, we see we feel it at least on our skins and on our body. And Chennai being what it is, I should be feeling the sun a lot more actually. But given the fact that this confinement of the lockdown and in the compulsion of being inside the four walls. No, what I was trying to say is that there is a false sense of safety. Okay, when you're inside the house you're safe. Of course it's true most of the times, but not all of the times. So what happened, there was a bereavement in my family. There are two elderly people who are living in a place called Srirangam, which is about 350 kilometers away from Chennai, and both were elderly couple, my father's brothers and his wife, that is my uncle and my aunt had passed away on the 3rd of August. And uncle was left alone. They don't have children, so we had to bring uncle home. And in that process somebody has dragged the virus in. I didn't
Yeah.
realize it at first because I was very healthy. Of course, when you have this mild cold and stuff like that, you don't take it seriously because it happens all the time. When you change water, when the weather gets a little colder, it usually happens. But I was testing the oximeter. Okay, this is something that people should be constantly doing, even if you don't have any symptoms. The oximeter reading, which is your blood oxygen level, it should be about 96, 97. If you're really robust, it's 100. 96, 97 is again a sign that you are very healthy. But if it goes below 92, 93, then it is a sign of danger. Then there should be you should be alarmed. So what happened, I was trying to check my oximeter. Of course oximeters are not accessible, so somebody has to do it for me. And it was 91 a couple of times. Then I told my brother that it's time that I need to kind of get myself tested for COVID. One led to the other, and that when you test go for a lab test, it's called RT-PCR. The RT-PCR test is your not a rapid test; it's a regular test. So a day later, I got my results, and the results showed that I was positive. And the next thing they do is to take you to a CT scan. The CT scan is they scan your lung to see the extent of the infection. And in my case, they said it's 40%. 40%. Imagine 10 days and 40%. 40%
You.
is
So when you say you recovered, has the lung also recovered, or lung damage is permanent?
no, the lungs have recovered. In my case, it has, but in the case of say 60, 65 plus, 70 plus, there is a danger that, for example, my uncle who came with me, he also tested positive, and me and my uncle were together in the same hospital. In fact, we were sharing the ward. But while I could sort of get myself discharged in a week's time, my uncle was still facing the breathlessness, and he was 85, by the way. And just the day after my discharge, he passed away. My aunt and uncle, just the matter of 26 days, they passed away. Aunt 3rd of August, uncle 29th of August. So
So Subbu, staying on the point of social distancing,
yep.
ये जो physical distancing के बारे में बात किया आपने, मेरे कई दोस्त हैं जो कहें कि it has become very difficult to travel by train, by bus, by the old days we would just take our cane and we would go out. आज के
Yes.
तारीख में you want to get into an auto rickshaw, वो रिक्शा वाला auto man will not help you get in, and you have to find, if you're totally blind,
Yes.
finding the entrance to the auto rickshaw itself could be a challenge. इसी प्रकार टैक्सी में, बस में लोग झिझकते हैं, जैसे आपने बिल्कुल सही कहा, people hesitate to kind of come forward and help you. And I think going forward, that's going to be a major challenge because this COVID is going to stay for a while, isn't it?
No, George, I heard something more alarming than that. I'll tell you what. There was this, this Blind Graduates Association. Not the one from Bombay. This is the one that operates out of Chennai. The Chennai locals will know. The
Yeah.
president of the association was actually going out
Yeah.
to catch a train or something. I was told that
Ji.
a gang of mobsters actually beat him up because they wanted to steal his mobile phone and his gold valuables. And he
Hmm.
was severely beaten, and he was taken to the general hospital here. And then his family was searching for him. Meanwhile, they didn't have an idea what happened to him. But by the time they could reach him, and then the whole thing came out, in a few days time he passed away. Okay.
Oh.
So what is happening is that COVID has also created the economic stress. So as a result of which, this mugging and pickpocketing and even beating up people for the valuables they have, the properties that they have, has become a very common thing. And blind, they're not excluding the blind. Earlier, what used to happen is when they see a blind person, even a thief will be very kind.
Hmm.
But of course they're all desperate right now, so nobody is kind to nobody. And there's this live danger. This I've heard in Chennai, and a couple of other instances where people had a very close escape. They kind of they realize that they're going to be mugged, and they kind of handed over things that they have, even including money, and they really have to walk out, empty
Now,
handed.
this is actually a very valid point you make. The economic stress is going to lead to increase in crime, and I think people like us, visually impaired blind people, also are going to be vulnerable to this kind of situation. So,
Yeah.
Apto, you work with Deccan Herald, and you are kind of a journalist. And before we get there, in April, May, we started getting a plethora of calls on our highway help desk, where the basics were also a challenge because people didn't get food, people didn't have rations, people were not getting their pensions, people were not able to go to the bank and draw money. There are all kinds of challenges that visually impaired people were having because for some of the reasons aapne kaha ki, people don't want to escort you, people don't want you to help you in a bank or help you at an ATM or help you to travel, uh,
Yes.
help you to get to the shops. At the same time, the ration, even the government machinery was not geared to deal with the situation. इसलिए ration shop में you were not getting your provisions, you didn't have a ration card, to start with, people were not giving you food. It had to be, then the government had to intervene. And I think now things seem to be much better, but in April, May, and probably part of June, the situation was pretty haywire. And this one. So on the professional front, how have you?
Okay, now first I should tell you that Deccan Herald has been around for nearly a century now, and we never had the concept of work from home because if you really want how a newspaper works is like the team that I work is part of the what is called the desk. The desk is basically where we receive the articles, we edit them, rewrite them, package them in a way in which it fits the space available, give them a headline, give a caption to the pictures, and so on. So these things you can't do from a remote location. It has to be done in a place because it's all deadline based. If you're going to do something after 10:30, for I'm just giving a rough time, 10:30, it's not going to make any sense to the editors because they need to put everything, package everything, and send it for printing at a specific time so that it gets printed, and the next day morning it reaches the agents who will deliver it to your doorstep. So that's the whole chain of events that needs to take place here. Uh, so work from home wasn't an option, but in the last 5 or 6 years we have been building a lot of online tools that would help us work even inside the office with a lot of ease. For example, the authoring tool, the editing tool that we use at our office is a very well-known German tool, which is browser based. So it was easier for us to operate things. So all that you need to do is to connect to a server from anywhere and make it work. So but of course nothing was planned for the what do you call, the lockdown or the pandemic. But it so happened that after March 16th 17th, the decision was taken at our organization that it's too dangerous to sort of function from one building, commute, and even stepping out of home would be a problem. So the work from home option came up, and this is probably the first instance. I'm sure this has happened to all the other newspapers, traditional newspapers like us. And so it's a tectonic shift, if you want to call it. It's a tectonic
Right.
shift in our industry, which is only seen, physical conduct work in from a one workplace, and use technology as a kind of a sideways mechanism, not as a mechanism at heart. But now everything changed. So work from home also happened at a time when I happened to be in Chennai. I didn't come here again thinking that I was going to be stuck here. My original plan was I just closed down my flat in Bangalore. Things were as they were. I didn't turn off my fridge. I didn't turn off my internet, thinking that I was going to be back in 2 days.
I was told that the house has caught fire. Is that have you heard of it?
Yeah, some houses have. Thankfully, not mine.
Okay.
But there was a very live possibility that things could be going bad.
Hmm.
I mean, thankfully, I had a local relative. I could pass on the key to them and then get that fixed. But
Great.
yeah, so I was stuck here, and then I was told that work is going to continue, but you can stay back in Chennai and work from there. So that's how it started. And then so far it has been going on that way. And also, there was a lot of space for innovation. you know for example, DH started a podcast. Podcast was something that we've been planning about, but of course it was the whole thing was moving on a little slowly. But pandemic kind of gave the impetus, gave the real charge to the whole thing. And then now it's on. Our podcast has been receiving rave reviews from everybody, the kind of interviews we do, the way we present news. And you all know the e-paper. Now the e-paper has gone under the paywall, you know gone I should say gone inside the paywall. And what it does is, if you access it for a fee, you can also listen to the news in audio, and watch the video, and read as well. So the multimedia is actually getting deployed in a pretty aggressive way, not just in my newspaper, but this is the case with the wider print newspaper industry today. So that's how it has been for me.
So, we also have been working from home. All of us, one of our colleague is working from Kashmir. We have another one working from Kolkata. We're all in the same office in Lajpat Nagar. But as soon
Yeah.
as this pandemic came, we all got scattered. We have somebody working from Calcutta, somebody from Kashmir, another one from Bombay. We have even in we a few of us in Delhi also, one from Noida, one from Rohini, all over the place. But what we found is that within a matter of a month or two, we have got kind of used to the idea. You have regular meetings, and I think technology has come into play in a very, very big way. Or technology. I'd like to say one thing here, that in 2015, our Prime Minister had talked about India going towards being a digital India. So that is a clear message to everybody in the country that we have to be digitally literate. And I think this is a message also to us blind people. And I think my personal view is that every state needs to, especially the organizations working for the blind in every state, needs to kind of take this digital literacy very, very seriously, because and I think this COVID has actually switched gears, meaning fast tracked us into the digital world. Uh, because everything that in the school we never imagined when we were sitting in February. I don't think we would have imagined that in a month's time we will be writing exams on online. We would be attending classes online. If I'm a teacher, I would have to teach online. If I'm a journalist, I will have to write online. If I am a parliamentarian, I'll have to attend parliament online. Everything has gone online. If I'm a newscaster, I'm sitting at home and doing my newscast. So the whole scenario has changed. And in a manner of speaking, when you look at it in hindsight, Mr. Modi's declaration of digital India was a kind of a warning of a premonition to the times ahead. And I think post COVID, I think a lot of the online scenario would continue. And I think we as visually impaired people need to kind of use this time to there's an opportunity here for us to actually develop our online skills. And I think if we have to be competitive, we have to master these things. It's not good enough to just know. I know Microsoft Word, but do I know it thoroughly? Can I edit? Can I write? Can I use all the features of Microsoft Word? Likewise, PowerPoint. Likewise, the Excel. Can I navigate on the internet with confidence? Of course, there are the accessibility issues, which is another topic. But as far as whatever is in our power, are we using this time to actually build our skills? And students, I think this online business is a perfect time for us to say goodbye to scribes and the dependency on the scribe. What do you think of this scribe business in among the blind people? Blind
I
people
think that
depending
will
on.
that will have to stop for two reasons. One is the concerns about social distancing.
Yeah,
Okay, you can't put a bunch of people in a room and risk a social spreader event.
yeah, yeah,
The what do you call the spreader uh, danger.
yeah,
That's one thing. And secondly, I'll tell you something. Uh, my own typing skills, I depend on my typing skills more than dictation skills these days. I was, mind you, I was once upon a time, I think all of us were comfortable about dictating stuff to people who can sort of take it down. I think that has changed once we got introduced to the keyboard and the computer culture. And given the fact that today, I think we can safely say that a majority of college-going blind students are very, very conversant with computers and keyboard. So I think it's a no-brainer. I would say that it's okay. The only thing is that UGC and probably the college administrations should change. But I think they are more compelled to change now because of COVID.
yeah. And that's one. And I think this is also probably the time for all of us who are present today on the Zoom call, as well as for all the other educated blind people to use this time to catch up on various things like information gathering, knowledge, reading newspapers, gathering information, because if we have to kind of be in this digital world and actually survive, I think we need to be up there as far as awareness, knowledge is concerned,
Yes.
as far as our language skills are concerned. I think all this is a good time to kind of work on all that, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, I think I should tell you that what this lockdown and pandemic has given rise to is what is being widely referred to as the gig economy. So the
Right.
gig economy is something very different from the traditional economy. Traditional
Yeah.
economy is when you go to an office, you're given a job, either it's a contractual job or a sort of a permanent on the payroll kind of a job. You're given a monthly salary.
Yeah.
But the gig economy works completely differently. It is work per earn. You know, or you can say, if you're contributing to so much of man hours, so much into a project, or so much of deliverables. If you're able to do so much, then on the basis of which people pay to get your skills. There's a
Right.
difference here. The difference here is that there's no insecurity about losing your job. Why? Because your skill is on demand. For example, if you're a food aggregator, or a food delivery platform.
Yeah.
And naturally, what happens is today, given the lockdown situation, people are likely to order more of the food from their homes.
Yeah.
So the delivery personnel, the delivery work itself has become a pretty fast earning sort of a work in metros. Okay, this is a part of the gig economy, by the way, because everything works online. You pay online, you order online, and somebody comes and delivers the food package at your doorstep. The same goes for grocery.
Yeah.
Okay, so the other part of the gig economy, which is more relevant to people with blindness, you can divide that into, you can put it in three buckets. The first bucket is content creation and content, a sort of a content selling. What
Yeah.
happens is, I think we are at a significant advantage as far as content creation is concerned,
Yeah.
uh, because a lot of us write blogs, a lot of us create YouTube videos, a few of us are in the business of creating podcasts. What has happened so far is that you did everything for hobby. You wanted to either share knowledge or but now the situation has come where there are people out there who are hungry to learn what you have to offer. In that case, they are even ready to pay. Okay, so what happens is you completely turn that into a business of some kind. Okay, there are different kinds of business models for that. Let me elaborate on it, because this is something which is very useful for people who already have an online presence. uh, there is something called audience building. Okay, if you look at television, for example, if you're watching a cricket match, you see a lot of ads. People pay to advertise their products to you. Why? Because there is a ready-made audience available for that particular event or a program. The same way, if you look YouTube, if you are a YouTube watcher like me regularly, there are certain programs on YouTube that there you feel you can see that it's getting interrupted with lots of ads. Why? You can say that if you look at the subscription, the number of subscribers to that particular channel, it would be more. Or the kind of regularly, if they regularly drop that particular episodes every day, that audience, there's a surge in the audience. So they become a natural audience for advertisers. So what happens is Google is willing to pay you to share the revenue for the advertisements with you, because you create the audience and they bring the advertisers. So that is what is becoming the gig economy. This is the first bucket that I told you. The second bucket is what is called email marketing. Email marketing is a very very interesting field, because if you're either a content creator, if you're a service provider, or if you're a product maker, what happens is you start building. See, I recently got into what is called the crystals and gemstones. I suddenly got interested in it because I work on a lot about my spiritual, what do you call it, my aura. If you know the energy body and how it works and all that, so crystal has got some connection to it, so I started working on it. And then I realized that a lot of people are today offering what is called the healing business. The healing business is nothing but, if you have an ailment, they kind of they're experts, of course, they're certified experts. So what they do is they do uh, distant healing, or a kind of a solution to sort of get rid of your pain, your headache, your backache and whatnot. And they build audience through what is called an email marketing platform. Today you have something called Mailchimp is a client. You can check it online, and there are several clients
Yeah.
like
Yeah. We
this.
use it.
Yeah, so what happens is you kind of capture the emails that kind of come to you, and then you create a sort of a regular audience. This is being proven as the best method to market, because if somebody doesn't respond, for example, and you can kind of remove them from the list, and in that place somebody else will come, because there are always people out there to kind of get the services that you offer. So when such audience is built, either the online giants like Google pay for you, or you can put up a price tag on your service and earn money out of it. So that is the second part of the second bucket of the gig economy. The third part is also very familiar to us. See, in reality, these the terminologies that we are using today may be very strange, but blind people got used to the gig economy way back in 2000, when the medical transcription was in vogue. When a lot of people got into medical transcription, and that was the in thing back then. So uh, so technology creation, like software development, coding, app creation, or today, as you rightly pointed out, digital economy is the in thing, the real thing now. So there is a need to make everything accessible. So accessibility service by in itself becomes a business now. Secondly, of course, if you know accessibility, and if there is a demand for you to teach accessibility to somebody, that's becoming a business also. Because this is one industry which is really manpower hungry. Today, people are looking for. I heard about a company. I don't want to name the company, but there are 100 accessibility professionals, and all of them are able-bodied. So how do you expect them to test a specific issue for the blind, or for the deaf, or for people with physical challenges? So there is a need today to hire people who actually can translate their experience into a service. So that is the third bucket of the gig economy that we are talking about today. So as you can see, there is an advantage in all these three buckets. There are I know that among the blind community there are lots of YouTubers, there are a lot of content creators, bloggers. This is the time for them to turn their hobby into a business. How they do it is, of course, they'll have to figure it out, but there is a way that they can do it. That's the good news. Secondly, of course, there are people who teach email marketing. See, I've learned email marketing painfully even before the COVID times, and I'm also planning to teach email marketing to a lot of people, so that it becomes a very effective tool to earn a livelihood. And thirdly, of course, there are accessibility professionals who you probably know, who kind of can be used either to to kind of impart the knowledge, or create workforce that can sort of be deployed at different projects or companies. So that's the gig economy in summary for you.
Yeah, so I just like to kind of continue from what you said. I think this is, one other thing is, suppose, for example, uh, what you really said is that, there are needs around, and if you think you have the ability and the skill to fulfill that need, you can use it as a launch of a possible career. And the beautiful thing about the online space is that you can have your clients from anywhere in the country, for that matter, anywhere in the world. For example, you could be sitting in India and offering to teach people in Korea who want to come to India, teach them Hindi and charge them for it. Or you could be offering people in Kerala and Tamil Nadu who want to come to Delhi, teach them Hindi, or teach English to be, depending on what our strengths are. This is just an example in point. But I think it's important for us to kind of, and that's why it's important for us to be aware of what is the need in the world, need around us, read about these things. And that's why reading and exploring the world through the internet, through newspapers, and you might suddenly find that there is something, there is a need in a particular location, and you have the capacity to fulfill that need. And I think you've given some examples already, like the medical transcription. There was a need for it in the US, and we were sitting in Delhi and India, all over the country, and kind of fulfilling that need. So I think, if we can kind of, while we are reading news, while we are kind of talking to people, if we sense that there is a need somewhere, and you have the skills to kind of use the use the internet medium to teach. You can use Skype, you can use Zoom, you can use Google Meet, whatever. But this is a great opportunity. There's this chap I know, I think somewhere in Uttar Pradesh, who worked in a bank, And he called me up and he says, I want to, I have time. My banking hours are from so and so to so and so, but in the evening I'm free. So I want to use this time to teach people English. And if there are people who want to learn English, how do I go about it? And then we talked about how to use these various platforms, and and I think he's got going with that as a professional case. Uh, there are a number of people who call up wanting to learn English, wanting to learn various languages. There are people, and language is only one of the many things. There are also, if you are skilled with Microsoft Word or computer language skills, you can teach computers on Skype or whatever. There are people I know who are teaching music. There are blind people who are teaching music and have clienteles in the US and Australia and so on. So, and that is why it's important for us to use this time to kind of develop skills which are useful to other people. And that is,
No,
I
I'll
think,
tell you. I'll give you one more example here. It's very
yeah,
funny. The other day, I
yeah,
was talking to a blind person in Ukraine,
yeah.
and that person was very eager to learn Indian cuisine.
Okay.
And I was thinking, oh, I wish I knew some blind people who kind of put up videos, cooking
Yeah,
videos,
yeah,
which can be sort of marketed, because there is a demand. See, there is no learning also there. You really do something, and people just watch you, and then they kind of prepare their own dish. And all that you need to do is to put up the list of ingredients and the method of preparation, and it is sort of becoming the curiosity. See, my brother runs a for example my brother runs a big business that sells bakery ingredients to big bakeries and hotels. So when the lockdown came up, what happened was, he thought he was going to struggle for his business, but lo and behold, at least 100 home bakers
hmm,
turned up at his shop and started buying things. And then he realized that there's something called home baking, which is becoming very, very fashionable these days. If you have a lot of time at home, like a lot of people now getting into gardening, there are so many number of people who are getting into home baking. If you know baking, how to do it, or how to do some dish, and if you put up a YouTube video, that can actually land a lot of clientele for you, in terms of followers for you. And I was reading at BuzzFeed, it's a news website, which says that in August alone, there are 2 billion people who downloaded TikTok. TikTok is a video platform, and what
yeah,
they
yeah.
create is really, TikTok is one platform that can actually allows people to create really crazy viral videos. So viral videos are one form of, again, getting your audience, building your audience, and it's a proof that the online economy, the gig economy, is actually at its peak right now.
Yeah, and I think this is the time for us to disrupt our normal way of looking at things, uh, normal way of doing things. It's time to be creative, time to explore and be innovative, try out new ideas. Like for example, there's this friend of mine. I think many of people on the platform just now also probably know her, Payal Kapoor. For instance, she has started a video, a YouTube channel called, I think it's called Rasoi Ka Rahasya, and she has actually demonstrated how people who are visually impaired can actually do cooking, handling the fire, handling the cutting, handling the ingredients, and so on and so forth. And listening to you speak just now, if the video YouTube channel is in English, uh, she could actually draw audiences from a global,
So absolutely, yes,
spread, and suddenly she'll find that Google is paying her for her channel.
absolutely.
So I think it's a question of looking at ideas, finding out what people need, and then find a way of putting it up there. It could be online, it could be, and what happens also is that if somebody, if your YouTube channel of say cooking or public speak training to public speak, that's another area which you could do. It could be storytelling. You could be telling stories. And when people find that this guy is good, then you find that you get orders, which is not just, you're not making money only because of the viewership, but you're also making money because you're starting to get orders. If somebody's business kind of, like for instance, let's take Payal's case itself. Say, people watch her and then feel that, there are a couple of things that, a couple of dishes, as you called it, uh, seem to be exciting. She could suddenly find that people are calling her up and saying, "Can we order, 2 kilos of, chicken biryani, or two kilos of tadka hua, whatever." So so you also bring in an offline marketing possibilities. Baking, for example,
Absolutely.
you could be baking for home deliveries. So and people like Zomato and all could be actually taking stuff from you and giving
Yeah,
you.
there are people who deliver. There are people
Yeah,
who are paid to deliver your stuff.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
that's covered.
yeah. So I think this is the time for us to kind of sit back and kind of introspect, see what we are good at, and even if you feel that you're good for nothing, you can start building a certain skill which you feel is likely to kind of be useful to people around.
No,
And
I'll
I
tell you,
think
George. Here's what is happening. I'll tell you what is happening. I mean, probably we
yeah,
can give a formula or some kind of technique for people to
yeah,
kind of zero down to what they exactly can do. I
yeah,
mean, I'm talking from whatever news that I've covered in the last 8 months, the news that I've read, and something that I've also observed online. Okay, uh,
yeah, yeah,
see, you may be good at a lot of things. Okay, if you
yeah,
ask a person honestly, they say that they can be good at crocheting, they can be good at writing correspondence, letters, communication, whatever. So what happens is they have to zero it down to just one thing. It's not about what you know. You may know a half a dozen things, but one thing that you really enjoy doing. For example, Payal's case is a very good case in point because she I mean, knowing her, I can say that she's somebody who sort of enjoys cooking. So what happens is, uh, you can turn your passion into business. That is exactly what the online economy is offering you today. If you're
yeah,
for
yeah,
example, a gardener, if you like gardening, you can take videos of your gardening. You can talk about plants, you can talk about because that knowledge that you have combined with your experience is something that people don't get outside. They may get it may be raw knowledge, but not
yeah,
how it works on the field or how it has worked for a person. So if you only know how to crystallize that experience and knowledge and work on it, it is given a lot of success. So the trick here is, it doesn't matter how much you know or how many things you know, but what actually makes you excited and passionate and driven. That's your business, and that's probably where you should be investing more of your time and energy.
yeah. I think the word is focus. Be focused, and if you're passionate about that focus that you have, I think you get the not only you'll find the resources, you'll find the energy and the willpower to actually make it work. And I'd like to, I mean, we are already on to 4:49 at the moment. So what I'd like to do is just to give an example. So I think passion is one driver. You choose an area of passion which you think you can take it to the ultimate level of making it a kind of a professional opportunity. And secondly, I think it is about also uh, doing your, like you are able to talk about all these things because you have been reading a great deal, right? You've been kind of
Yes,
you've been
yes,
investigating, you've been doing it because you were looking for stories, perhaps, or you were looking for
yes.
ideas for putting up an article. So, and I think it is research. And normally, when people say that you're looking for an idea, they straight away what people do is research, and research is what, looking for information, looking out for details, looking out for it could be at various levels. It could be looking for ideas. It could be looking at, so you could be watching videos, you could be watching YouTube, you could be listening to podcasts, you could be reading articles, and you never know where you get a spark of an idea. So I think that extensive reading and research is also something that we need to do. And I think your basic skills of communication,
Yes, important.
I
Yes,
think
yes, that
is
is
important,
absolutely
because
important. Whatever you do.
whatever you do, you should be able to express yourself, and express yourself in a convincing manner with conviction. So I think this communication is as important. And I think, and then given that we are on the online era of evolution, we need to master and be comfortable on that platform. So I think this could be four basic things that we could look at. And I think these are guiding principles, which I think could apply to any space that we choose to work on. And before we open out to questions, I'd like to just give a little story of my own life, where I took up an area of passion, which is I'm passionate about cricket, and to the extent that I could kill for cricket. I was so passionate, and I was extremely disappointed in life when I realized that with my blindness, it was not going to be possible to play cricket beyond a point, beyond playing cricket in the backyard of my house or the backyard of my college, using tennis ball and tennis racket. There was no way I could play with a leather ball and play on the regular field. And then, I saw this group of kids playing cricket. And when I mentioned to some people when I came back to Delhi from Dehradun that I'm going to promote cricket for the blind, 99% of the people laughed at me. They said, you're going to, this is a no-brainer. You're going to hit a wall right away. But I think it was the passion. First of all, this gave me an opportunity to, make my contribution to a game which I loved passionately. And there were several instances in the journey that I took since 1989-90, where if passion was not there, I would have given up. It was just a passion to kind of make it happen, that we organized a World Cup, and 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 that journey gave me the recognition. A lot of people around the world today know me as the guy who brought blind cricket onto the world map, and a lot of people know that. Even people who do not know me personally are aware of it. So a passion, and a lot of people say, "Oh, you're talking about the cricket, George." So it has actually made me into what I am today, in a manner of speaking, my passion. So I think the word passion has a lot of potential, a lot of meaning, and it can actually transform people.